Hey guys, it's Chris Truitt from the Reluctant Somm. We're really excited about season 3. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for listening. Just wanted to give another little note that if you like what we're doing and you want to show us some support, reviews, likes, shares, word of mouth, all of these things really help us. We'll also be creating a newsletter this year that focuses on some of our favorite restaurants, favorite wine lists, favorite places to eat, as well as just some really cool people in the industry, as well as some other insights into what's going on in our field of profession. I also wanted to let you know that on that is where we'll be updating everybody on all of our pop-ups and any collaboration events or anything that we're doing. So if you want to keep track of us, that's the best way. Also, if you're not already following us on Instagram, you can follow us at Reluctant Somm on Instagram and keep up with us. Give us likes. Cheers.
Cheers.
That's a good temp. John, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much.
Happy to have you here. I feel like I've known you forever, but we've only met one time before, so I'm excited you're on here. You have you have great representation in San Francisco. Everybody I talk to loves you dearly, and it's cool. So I'm excited to have you on. So,
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
It's great to hear.
So the normal intro that we always do is, if you could just introduce yourself, kind of give us your background, like, bring us up to speed with where you are today and kind of your path in wine.
All right. There's probably a lot more to say than I'll probably say here, but basically, born in Miami, came out to Sacramento when I was 5. My mom is Indian, my dad's Persian, but both grew up in Bombay, so pretty Indian culturally at home, and pretty liberal Indian, let's say. And then moved to the Central Valley for a little while. We moved a lot with my dad's job. He's an engineer, and it made it up to Visalia, which was an interesting 3 years of my life. And then by the time I was 12, 13, I moved to Argentina, where my dad had taken a job, and that was pretty formative. And really liked it down there, and I still love it, and have a lot of friends, and all throughout South America, not just Argentina. And and then I did my first harvest there when I was pretty young. My dad had a friend with a winery and stuff, and I was just a kid who liked to get drunk, and so I more than volunteered myself to do some work, and I was surrounded by wines that I'd never tasted, and things that were fermenting, and it was really interesting. And then by the time I came back, I went to Berkeley High for my last year of high school, and kind of, did the 18, 19, 20-year-old thing, and was a ski bum up in Truckee for a while, and worked on the slopes, and that was really fun. And then I came back and went to work at a place called the Spanish Table in Berkeley.
With Andy.
Yes, with Andy Booth. Actually, at that point, this was 2005, so Andy was actually the wine buyer at the time.
I forgot Andy bought it from someone else.
Right.
I forgot that.
I was hired by Sharon and Steve.
Wow.
Good old Steve, can't remember the last name, but Steve was a really interesting story. He was a Vietnam vet who had come back, and I guess they'd gone traveling after the war, and he really fell in love with Spain, Portugal, and North Africa, and decided he was going to open this place that was all the greatness of the cuisine and wines of those places. In Pike Market in Seattle was the first one, and then they opened Berkeley on September 11th, 2001. So God. Very auspicious day to open it, and I think they closed right away. But anyway, they hired me in 2005. Andy was the buyer. Well, had just been the buyer. I think they had just hired a different person, Kevin Hogan. Anyway, and so that was where I kind of underwent the institution of Spanish wine. And I tasted a lot of wines, and I got really into wine. Then I went to Davis. I didn't study enology viticulture. I took plenty of classes, and after that, I went back to the Spanish Table as the wine buyer, and kind of got poached by an importer who said I'd be good at wine sales, and the rest is kind of went through so many books. I mean, I could go through it, but like I started with a really shitty Chilean portfolio a friend of mine used to bring in. I was probably in my late 20s, or no, not late 20s, I was 26 or something like that. And I just wanted to get into wine sales. And I learned, I was selling to liquor stores and like anybody. I just had the hunger. I wanted to be a rep, and I wanted to be in wine, and this was a way. And I could set my own schedule. It wasn't the retail hours and stuff like that. I was pretty bored working in a store. I don't think I ever really loved buying. But I worked for Matador Vino, which was this guy used to work for Olé many, many years ago, Michael Hutchinson, and he had really cool, like, small Portuguese vineyards and, like, a lot of Spanish stuff, sold a lot of sherry, and I did really well with that book. And then once I did well with that book, I kind of had the whole Bay, and I had made connections all over the Bay, and then I was more of a useful rep to bigger companies, and so I got, not bigger companies, but let's say more niche books, and so I took a real interest in French vigneron wine, and I met Nadia from in those days it was Jolivan, and now it's called Floraison, and we liked each other instantly. We're still really good friends till today, and I love the wines, Domaine de la Tournelle, Marie Courtin, Emmanuel Brochet, you name it. She had some, ethereal, beautiful French wines to sell. Started working for her. Then I took a real interest in Eastern Europe, and I started working for Blue Danube, which is now Danch and Granger, and Eric Danch was my boss and taught me all about Zaparavi and Yellow Muscat and funny grape varieties in places I didn't know a whole lot about, but was interested. And I had studied history, so I was really interested in like communist history and Iron Curtain and those blocks and stuff like that. So it was very interesting to me, and for the longest time I repped those books along with Grand Place selections, which was Van Poden, and so I was just tasting all this good wine, and they had Grand Cru, so I was tasting good French wine, and
cool.
Not the vigneron French wine, but good French wine, and there was no natty dogma, but there was definitely, I knew what I was wanting to get into and what I liked more and more. And then, Ordinaires opened in 2015, I think. And they had all these wines that I had no idea about, and this whole wave of wine that I'd known the names of, but I didn't know what it was. And so that was a whole fun time to grow up in natural wine. Not finally, but after that, I got like a real job. This big company called Winebow came and they said, "We see that you sell a lot of wine here. We are willing to offer you actual money and benefits, and you can go to Hawaii 4 times a year and all this stuff." And I was like, "Well, I don't like the wine," but I took the job because it was a good stepping stone to like. It was a good career move, even though, the wines for the most part were underwhelming. But I got to go, to places I had never been and make
a lot more travel budget.
Got to spend money at restaurants, and I, don't come from a shit ton of money, so it was really interesting to have like enough money for a second. I did that for several years and kind of learned national sales a little bit. I just had the West, but it taught me a lot about spreadsheets and shit that you don't really want to learn, but that if you do learn can help you in national sales positions. So then after that, I got offered the job I really wanted. And it was with David Bowler. I had been repping David Bowler with Grand Place selections already, and we'd had all the Canary Island wines and like all their fun imports,
sick Beaujolais and stuff.
So just great in general, great wine, particularly good Spanish wine for what they did DI, and some good Austrian wines, some decent French wines and Italian wines too. But mainly it was like the cool Spanish book that's what I think attracted them to me. But anyway, started that back in 2016 or 17. And then I did that until the pandemic, and I lost my job. Just before the pandemic. And then I said, well, fuck it. Like, I've never taken unemployment. I've been working since I was like 17 in this country. Let me go see, what there is to do. And I went back to Argentina, and I did harvest with the Michelinis. So I went to Michelini y Mufato in Tupungato. And I did harvest with them. It was a great time. I was getting paid unemployment. I was, I had no idea that the world would stop. And then the world stopped and I had to come back, but it was a really great time. And when I came back, I decided that I, wanted to start Chuchaquis in earnest. I had met Ryan in 2013 because he was making Tyler. He was working with Justin Willett at Tyler. They made Ludi, they made Tyler, they made Winslow, and they made Volan.
Okay.
And these were and they probably made other stuff too, but those were the ones I knew that I sold for Grand Place, and they were really cool wines. This was, IPOB days where people were trying to do wines that had more balance and probably just, had more acid really and less extraction and less wood and blah, blah, blah. And I met Ryan then, and that was when I realized that the assistant winemaker is the one who, really makes the wine. He's there every day doing morning rounds, evening rounds.
Not the one that flies in once a year and goes like, yeah, that's good.
Less of the chef, more of the sous chef.
Yeah.
So, picked Ryan's brain a lot. I was super interested in production at the time. Ryan was, by 2013, he was already making his own Rieslings. I think he'd just come back from the Wachau. He'd worked with Tiggersnerhof in the Wachau and learned Riesling Gruner, and he probably made Dornfelder. I think he made Zweigelt, etc. And he was really interested in kind of replicating the style in California, and he found a really cool Riesling vineyard called Kick On Ranch. Anyway, I tried his Riesling. I really liked it, And I was like, man, you have kick-ass wine. So we got him in the book. Me and Andrew Paul Nelson, who now owns Golden Sardine, were the only people that repped the book at the time. We were really stoked on Ryan's wines, and we wanted to help him. So we got him in the book, started selling his wine. Eventually, both of us, APN and I, both wanted to get in production. And, APN had this real master, idea of having this cool winery, and, we were going to partner up with somebody. We didn't really know who, but we knew Ryan the best. And so we did harvest with Ryan, and he was just stoked to have someone help sell his wines because he just knew nothing about selling his wines. And I don't think he cares. Even today, maybe that's for a different. I'll let him talk for himself. But he wants to be in a winery.
More about making the wine than selling it. Yeah.
And we I don't necessarily, making wine is hard, and it's a lot of tough, hours, and it's hard on your back, and it's really fun, but it is a lot of labor in that way, and selling wine is not. It's labor in a different way. So I think it works better for him. So we just kind of had this partnership. He was like, if you can help me sell wine, I'll help you learn how to make wine. And so it worked out. And so in 2015, we started our first project with Ryan. This wine. I can keep going about.
Did this come from before Stirm?
Yeah. Well, Stirm.
Well, I guess you said it's kind of around the same time.
Stirm was, I think he technically started Stirm Wine Co. in 2013.
Okay.
We were a proprietor in Stirm Wine Co. in 2015. So, meaning we gave Ryan money for fruit. We helped make it, but we gave we're a proprietor of his winery at the time. We had, Ryan was making wine in Santa Barbara, so he knew this great Albariño source. Me and Andrew wanted to make something like Vinho Verde. That's what we wanted to make. Something like with Albariño, kind of spritzy, light, fresh, high acid. It's what we liked. And so we get this awesome Albariño fruit, organic, right next to the ocean, C5 vineyard. We're all stoked. We pick it real bright and acidic, ready to make a pet nat out of it, So our boy Tony was working at Liquid Farm at the time, which wasn't too far away, and we had to borrow a stainless steel tank from him. And we threw it in there, pressed it in there, and it, over the weekend we had to go home, but we were going to come back and pick it up. It was like 112 degrees that weekend in Santa Barbara, and it was supposed to be on glycol. Yeah. I don't know if Tony ever ended up putting it on glycol, or if the glycol broke, or what the hell happened. But by the time we got back, that wine was not going to be a pet nat anymore, because it was dry. It had gone through everything in 3-4 days. So I freaked out, not knowing much about what we were going to do with the wine after that. It was picked blindingly acidic and probably was like 10.5% alcohol at that point. And Ryan, actually the story is that we talked to Brad Friedman, who makes the Ghost Note wines, who was making wine in our facility at the time. Good friend of mine, Brad. And Brad was like, I know what you guys should do. You should blend in some must. And you're not adding sugar, you're adding yeast and sugar from a different source, but you can crown cap it. You should do it to 16 grams per liter, crown cap it, and you don't have to disgorge it either. And Ryan was like, that could work. Yeah, let's try it. And I was like, well, whatever. I'm not. This isn't going to sell as is. So it was just a shot in the dark.
Yeah.
And so we did that, and 3-4 months later, we had a sparkling Albariño, and we used the must from the Kick on Ranch Riesling pool, which was the week after.
Yeah.
So then, kind of in I guess a tradition, we just do it like that every year, except we use its own must.
I see.
So like the way we make the wine is like we put about 1/13 of the must goes into glycol, stays chilled, doesn't ferment. The rest of it ferments almost dry. Blend the two up, crown cap, no disgorgement.
So cool.
And it gets racked once off the groceries, so it's not an inch of craziness.
Yeah.
And neither of us want to disgorge, so it works out. And we think that the wine ends up tasting nice and fun because of that. Like I think sometimes I get pet nats that are a little funky, more funky than I want to drink. And I feel like this one is rarely that funky. So that's a little bit of kind of how I met Ryan. And once we started doing this was a hit, and we made a couple other cuvées, and we just sell them kind of locally. And then there was some interest in New York and other parts. Excuse me. And we ended up in 2020, I came back from Argentina and kind of was like ready to do this full time. And I got some investment. We have a small equity partner that threw in some money, and we ramped it up, from about 100 to maybe 200 cases to about 1250 in 1 year.
Yeah.
So we needed some money to buy some grapes, and we got into it fully and have been chugging along ever since with Chuchaquis. With Stirm, that started in 2013, and he's been able to grow that. And then we have another project called it's a canned project, called Companion.
How did I not know about that?
It's not sold that well, it's smaller, and the idea behind Companion was that we would have partnerships with our like friend winemakers around the state. So Gina, what's her brand called? Gina from
Sans.
No, not that Gina. Although that Gina's a really cool person. Gina, Lady of the Sunshine.
Oh yeah, those wines are awesome.
Yes, and we really like her Sauv Blanc, so she made the Sauv Blanc. Graham Tatomer, the homie, the other Riesling guy. Yep. We had to make the Gruner.
Because his Gruners are also really good.
Awesome. And Scott from Jolly Lad made the Pinot Gris.
Dude.
And so, we had a really cool thing going for a while, and I think I'm not really financially involved in that project, so I personally don't really try that hard for them, but there's just been less steam. And I think can production kind of peaked in 22, and it's been going down a little bit, so it's not as easy to sell them. But so Chuchaquis, because I throw a lot of umph behind the brand as far as like the market goes, and I think the wines are experimental and cool, and so we've been able to keep this thing rocking. And Stirm's much more classic and Riesling focused, old vineyard from California focused kind of is the vibe. So we find that we have a nice little complementary thing going for and we're the only people in the winery. We used to be kind of a co-op winery. Like Ryan always rented the winery and kind of was the main person, but we used to have Megan from Margins in there. We used to have James from Flores in there. Brent Stagiaire was in there. Even subject to change his first year, Alex and all them were in the winery. Who else? Andrew Lardy. God, what the fuck is it? Wonderwork. So there's a ton of people in there. And then I think Ryan, in the end kind of was like, look, I think if we scale up Chuchaquis and just, scale up Stirm and do some cans, I think, we can be on our own. So,
Yeah.
So everyone found their own wineries after that. And,
That's awesome.
Big happy family.
Yeah. Well, it's cool to see kind of the connection that ties them all together, though, too. A facility, right, has probably made these incredible relationships and friendships that have lasted,
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, no. Oh, James is like one of our besties. Definitely. James is, we'll have like, barbecues during harvest and just like hangs at the winery sometimes. It's been real cathartic over the years. So,
sure.
Yeah, that's been a lot of fun. I don't get to the winery as much as I used to. Admittedly, Ryan is the winemaker. I am Jedi in training. And, the important thing is to sell the wines. Mm-hmm. And so, oftentimes, August, September, like, is a really good time to make sales. Mm-hmm. But it's not a good time for me to be out in the market if I want to be doing harvest. So I have to kind of reconcile those two things. But honestly, Ryan doesn't need me. We have like we had an assistant for a while, and then we use like just interns, and the interns are there 10 hours a day, and I'm a little old for the shit now. So I do less around the winery these days. But I was big into going in 18, 19, 20. 2020, I even helped Ryan farm a vineyard in Santa Cruz, a couple vineyards in Santa Cruz, which was my only year farming, and we got our ass handed to us that year as there were massive fires in Santa Cruz. We picked the vineyard anyway, tried to direct press some Pinot Noir, and it was just smelled like a Weber. So we ended up sending it to a couple buddies in LA that do distillation, and we made some brandy out of it.
Oh, that's
brandy
awesome.
Drinks real good.
Yeah.
But the wine was the rosé was smoky as hell. And, it was just it just sucked because you spent so much time like pampering these vines, and I now I know what farmers feel every other year.
Yeah.
And I know that the buck really stops in the vineyard with the grower. Mm-hmm. In the end of the day, those are the people that get the worst deal. So I don't envy them, but we need them badly, and I think they're getting a crap deal right now. A lot of people are ripping stuff up, and not easy to sell grapes. And
what's cool what you guys are doing, where you're like finding these wines that are domestic Albariño. There's not a ton of it. You know what I mean? There's and there's probably more than I can think of, but it takes people championing those vineyard sites and those grapes to make them more prolific, right? I've had on Dan Petrosky earlier in the season, and all of the grapes that he works with, and they're trying to find some more and more vineyards. And Brian Terrizzi at Giornata was on earlier this season as well. Another person seeking out domestic Ribolla Gialla and shit like that. If there's no interest in it, it's never gonna happen. So, or they're gonna do what they did in Paso. There's the Lunamata vineyard. I think it was the Lunamata vineyard that Brian was sourcing Aglianico from. It's like one of my favorite Aglianicos I've ever had, and it's one of my favorite grapes. And Dow ripped it up and planted cab. They bought the farmer out, and like you said, winemaking's hard. Working the vineyard's hard. These people see a Dow slides a check across the table to you, and you go like,
oh yeah, or don't get paid for 2 years. It's not an easy, not a hard decision to make as a grower. You just take the money. If you have money, then maybe you can do the passion projects and stuff. I mean, case in point, and to riff off your Aglianico, Soleto, which is a vineyard we buy quite a bit of fruit from. We get our Negrette for our Bandito down there, and we've gotten Cab from them, and I know Ryan's gotten plenty of Cabernet Pfeffer from them. I don't believe they're farming the vineyard this year, and they've been trying to sell it, and I don't think there are any takers, and so we probably won't get the Negrette anymore or the Cab Pfeffer from there anymore. And it's a tragedy because they have, speaking of Aglianico, plenty of it and really good. And to mention Brad again, at Ghost Note, he used to make it too, and it was one of my favorites. And you won't see that again, so
it's rough.
It sucks. It's a sad story in wine right now. I think that there's been overproduction, and it's kind of correcting itself, and it's going to take a few years to get there.
Yeah, Dan gave us a visual when he was on the podcast that I really loved, and he called it the hourglass effect. And it was like all the immigrants, all the clones, all the grapes from all their different regions funneling down into just, a few core varieties, and now it's going to expand back out again, which is it gives me hope, right? And again, seeing brands, obviously this is not a new brand, but seeing brands kind of like pop up out of nowhere that I haven't seen before that are championing these small grapes, or again, working with lesser known regions or lesser known vineyards makes me really excited. Whether it's, hopefully it's both, right? It's the spirit to promote the region and the grape, or the vineyard and the grape, but also financially viable because you're not buying Napa Cab, at least, right?
Oh yeah. So, I couldn't believe it. I went to Tokelon this year. Never been before. Always heard, historic.
Big,
Napa
flat,
vineyard.
boring vineyard.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
I mean, immaculately worked.
Yeah.
But guy told me it was $70K a ton.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which,
Woof.
if you do a little calculation, that's like $250 a bottle right there.
Yep.
Just without any other costs involved. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
That baffling to me why anyone would pay that, but I get historically why, it's an important place. And,
certainly. Yeah. Has a lot, and it has site specificity and everything. I mean, just give it all the merits that we can, but I mean, the cool thing is these wines are everyday wines. They're wines that you can put on your dinner table with your friends. They're wines that you can open on a Thursday night.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
And even here, Central Coast used to be much more affordable for fruit. The fruit costs in the Central Coast have gone up quite a bit.
Yeah.
Quite a bit. Where we were before 2020, we were looking at, prices from 1,000 to 2,000. Nothing is probably as cheap as 1,000, but like 15 to 12 to 1,500 to 2,000 or so. And now it's like there's nothing under 2,000 that's worth it.
Yeah.
I'm talking about organically farmed, dry farmed, etc. You're not shopping at that price point anymore. And it's crazy that we can even keep these wines as cheap as they are because, well, we're making wine in the middle of nowhere in Watsonville. We have very low costs, low overhead for our rent and wineries. I'll be honest, we had to be real pragmatic this year and figure some shit out because the industry is by and large like failing, and a lot of wineries are going out of business, and you have to start thinking outside the box and like putting up with shit you wouldn't normally put up with. Like, for example, we're warehousing inside the winery. And just hoping to sell through the wine before harvest comes.
That's rough.
Which is my job.
Yeah.
And it's like, it ain't easy, but, Ryan's counting on me to get the wines out the door before he has to figure something out.
Pull all the grapes in,
all of our inventories in the winery, and we're lucky to have some space, but that saves us a ton of money.
Yeah.
So, we make shortcuts where we can. We don't pay an assistant winemaker for the time being. Ryan's pretty much doing most of the work himself. It's a cutthroat time in
labor
the wine
love.
industry. Yeah.
That's I mean, it's unfortunate to hear, but I think it's so valuable to hear because I think if we don't talk about it, nobody's gonna know. And I sent my family member in Texas sent me a text like, hey, I'm looking to get a bottle of wine for my boss. They like Italian red. What do you recommend? And the first thing I did was look up like small family owned and operated wine bars and wine shops in Austin.
Forget about it. There's a few, right?
Right. There's not a ton, but I looked those up and I was like, that's where I'm going to suggest. Right. Sure. And I included, a couple total wine suggestions on like, core wines like Gaia de Gromas or whatever. And I was like, you got to toss this in there for the mix. But I said, I'd highly recommend supporting small businesses at this time and the small wineries because, it's all trickle-down effect or trickle-up effect maybe at this point. I'm not sure.
I don't think anything's trickling anywhere, unfortunately. Doesn't seem to be.
You've got an event coming up soon that I wanted to talk to you about. It was the 420. You're doing something with Andrew at Golden Sardine. What are you guys up to?
Oh, besides getting real stoned?
Yeah.
No. We're so Donnie, I was talking about Donnie, whom I think you should definitely have on the show because he's, in my humble opinion, one of the best natural winemakers in California. He used to make wine up in Yuba County with those guys up there, Frenchtown Farms, and just feel like gets it, is one of those winemakers that gets it and makes really fun, cool wine without like it tasting a bit like a garbage can, and does everything with integrity, and the sourcing's immaculate, and the vineyard works really good, and the wines taste true and of place, and anyway, we're big fans. And Donnie does some wines in Latin America, and namely Chile. He partnered up with a guy in Chile who's a great winemaker, and they kind of he goes down every year to do a little harvest, which was always something that I wanted to do. And so we've talked about doing that, and he's going to showcase a couple of wines that he makes in Chile, and I'm going to bring in some wines from my day job, which is Jose Pastor. And we have really cool, awesome, like interesting natural Chilean wines that are made really well and from 180-year-old vineyards, and just really cool.
Because most of it survived phylloxera, right?
Yeah, I mean, phylloxera by and large didn't come to Chile because Chile is a really interesting area for viticulture, because you're blocked by so much. Like, you have the Atacama Desert, which is the driest desert in the world in the north. You have the Andes Mountains, which is complete desert tundra, cold, and nothing can come through, and 26,000 foot peaks. And then on the west you have, of course, the Pacific Ocean, and then the south you have more tundra. You have Patagonia. And so phylloxera never really made it. A lot of sandy clay soils. Pretty easy to dry farm in Chile. They get dumped on all the time with water, especially in the south. Organic farming is prevalent. People have done it for years that way, and it hasn't been that hard to convert. And lots of old vines because of the phylloxera thing. And so you get really interesting viticulture over there. And so if I go down, eventually the plan is to make Chuchaquis in different countries too.
Ooh, cool.
Kind of like Donnie does.
Yeah.
In a slightly different capacity, but similar to what Donnie does. Probably start doing something in Argentina or Chile, and then move it up to Spain and do something over there.
Right.
And maybe even in Portugal, and partner up with fun winemakers where I can use their facility and buy some grapes from them, and hopefully it helps them out by buying some grapes. I'm not talking about making a shit ton of wine, maybe 250 to 500 cases. Yeah. And have like a thing where we do that. Not like kind of the opposite of like what Boutanche is, with different winemakers making different stuff. It'd be us going and making stuff in different places. And I know Ryan really wants to get down to South America for a vintage, and we kind of want to do it for fun too, but we think it's highly sellable, mainly because the cost of making wine in Argentina is much cheaper than making wine here. We're pretty confident we can buy nice fruit and make some good wines from there, and still be able to bring them in a reasonable price, like let's say less than $35 on a shelf. Yeah.
That's so cool. It's very fascinating. It makes me think of I don't know if you've ever had the Evil Twin Brewing. They McKellar Brewery. He has a twin brother, and they call him the Evil Twin. Okay. And his whole thing is he goes around to different breweries all over the world, and he makes different beers at all the different breweries, and it's like New York City hotel room. Oh no, Alone on Christmas in a New York City hotel room is one of his beers. It's great. Molotov Cocktail is another one. It's weird. It's all over the place. I haven't seen the beers in a long time, but I love that I don't know, spirit of it's kind of wanderlust. Collaboration. Yeah. It's a little bit of a wanderlust. So cool. Thing. Yeah, which is awesome. Me for sure. And Ryan, has a young boy and has a wife, but would one day like to dabble in the travel as well. Yeah. And so we're hoping that this could be a sustainable long-term thing. And also South America is kind of a pivot because the tariffs, hoping that they don't land in Argentina and Chile, and that we can import the wines without having to be slapped on the wrist for it. And that would make it ever the more let's say viable. But my ultimate dream was to do it in Iberia, where the grapes and the terroir is like, what I've always loved. Yeah. Where I first came from in winemaking, and when you have incredible relationships over there at this point, I'm sure. Yeah, all that. So, that's cool. And I just want to spend more time there too. Yeah. So, it's a good excuse to go. It's all part and parcel of the same thing. Yeah. But not just because of the tariffs and Trump, etc. More because
I've been planning, to go and do that for many years now. And this is a little bit of a gentle push out.
Yeah.
So we'll see if I can do it.
That's cool. And I think you're right. I think it sounds sellable. I mean, the whole concept of, 500 case production and things like that, people want to get behind that. At our small consulting project, we sometimes put like case production, like 200 cases, 500 cases. People like that. I mean,
for
sure, there's an air of exclusivity that is a draw, but additionally they go like, oh, there was so little of this produced, I want to support it because it'd be great if there was more produced, right?
Yeah, I mean, we'll start there. If it's popular and it sells quickly, then maybe we'll be able to make more. But starting slow and making like good wine that like is from smaller plots, this is always going to be the way. So we're never going to make thousands and thousands of cases. But it'd be nice to get up to a couple thousand one day.
Sure.
For the out of the U.S. stuff.
Yeah.
Right now our production is less than 2,000 cases here in the country. So we don't make a ton here. Mm-hmm. But the idea is to have more wine over time. And, if we have to skirt the issue by bringing it in from a country that's not tariffed, we'll do that. Yeah. But no, Spain was the ultimate dream. And we'll see one of these days. I still have a day job. So, I'll see how I can work it all into
Gotta put in a 2-month, 3-month vacation request.
Yeah,
see how
I don't
it goes.
know if that's going to work for Jose, but we'll find out.
Yeah. So wine number 2,
Thank you.
What is this? I feel like I've had this. I feel like Andrew pours this at Golden Sardine, and I feel like I've had it done. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank the Lord that Andrew, we will always be the homies, and Andrew supports a lot. Mm-hmm. And Chuchaquis was his idea.
Oh, really?
Yes. Andrew had a friend. I grew up in Argentina, but Andrew had a friend who had lived, I believe, in Ecuador. And in Ecuador, they use a colloquial term called chuchaqui, and it turned out that it meant hungover, which literally translates to legless.
Yeah.
Like in Quechua, but it's used as a kind of a term for hungover or even for drunk. Could kind of be either. And when I heard him say it, I just thought it was amazing, and so we thought it would be a fun thing to name the company. So that was actually APN's concept. And he's a very conceptual fellow.
Yeah.
And he did a really good job. Like, I have to give him credit. Like a lot of the original branding was his idea. Mm-hmm. And it did us well, and I kind of riffed on it, and me and Ryan took it in a different direction, but not that different. Like we always had a tilt of the cap to the old California, Californios, and so that links into the viticulture because we pull from a lot of old Cienega Valley vineyards that were planted around the turn of the century. We kind of took that and riffed on it, and started evoking old heroes or even anti-heroes of California. Like one that we used was Tiburcio Vasquez, who really interestingly used to be this kind of Robin Hood figure back in the day. There were lots of first-hand accounts, like journals of women that would talk about how he was like this hunk and this like scary person, but that he was this larger than life guy. And then there's other accounts about him and his gangs stealing from panhandlers, stealing the gold and giving it to the poor.
Yeah.
He robbed a bank in San Juan Bautista, actually in Tres Pinos, I believe, somewhere around there, which is kind of where we're at for the wineries here, and the vineyards, sorry. And there's still a poster that's that we have that says wanted dead or alive, $1,000 reward on his head because he had robbed the bank more than once. And we just love that. So that was kind of the idea behind Los Chuchaquis. It was kind of mixed up into Quechua vernacular for hungover, old Californios, and this kind of almost aggrandizement or historical memory of these larger than life figures. Actually, Tiburcio Vasquez was who they ended up modeling Zorro after.
Wow.
So he is actually a pretty famous figure. But to answer your question, the vineyard here is a Gemelli vineyard, which is in Cienega Valley. AVA. close to the Enns vineyard. It's the sister vineyard to Wurs. And it was the original planting of that vineyard was in 1905. So it's a very old vineyard. It's mainly limestone soils, so very sought after soil type in California. And they farm it, organically and we swear by it. They make Sangiovese. They have Sangiovese there, which we used to make into red wine. Made great red wine, but we thought we might make a rosé version of the Albariño, and it turned out so good that we just decided to just put it all into that. And maybe in the future we make some red wine out of it too. Yeah. We'd like to buy more and more from them because we really value the fruit. We think it's great. And then we buy from Wurs, which is across basically this dirt road. It's more decomposed granite over there, but also planted a long time ago. 1902, I believe, was the original
Some
planting.
of the oldest Riesling, domestic Riesling, right?
The Riesling was planted in 64. It's one of the oldest plots of Riesling in California. I think Stony Hill might be the oldest one. Real old one, yeah. But there's a good amount, and the Riesling at Wurs, we love it. We love Pat. We love what he does. We want Pat to be on our labels, like that's the guy.
That'd be cool.
And, maybe we hope to be buying from them for forever. But yeah, so we make it the same way as the Albariño with the blending of the must back in and crown capping and no disgorging and all that. And then I didn't bring it today because it was kind of a shot in the dark at what we wanted to do, but we still like it. We made a red too, and we want to make a red this year as well in the same style.
I see. Okay.
Like kind of a Lambrusco.
Oh, that's cool. Ooh,
yeah. We made one out of Soleto Negrette.
Okay.
And it's really cool.
100% Negrette?
100% Negrette.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's kind of Lambrusco like. It has unfortunately it did not bubble up fully.
Sure.
And we know why, but it's cool because it's like slightly bubbly, slightly has some RS in it, which is kind of awesome because it's like it's like kind of like Lambrusco in that way. Probably not as bubbly as Lambrusco, but it gets you to that same kind of feel, especially with Negrette being such a dark, hibiscus-like kind of flavor, and pairs super well with charcuterie and even goes with spicy food. It's pretty great, but it didn't bubble up completely. So this year we'll make it again, and we'll try to do it right this time. But yeah, we'll have the 3 sparklings. We do a light red from Grenache, from around like Santa Clara, Monterey areas, and that one's kind of a kitchen sink wine of just like the lighter macerated barrels that we have, like just blend them up and that becomes the Mago. And then we do Rosa del Peru, which is actually from the original 1902 planting at Wurs.
Wow.
Kind of crazy grape, seems to be some kind of hybridization of Muscat of Alexandria and Listan Negro.
Wow.
And we find it at Wurs. You find it actually I saw a lot of it in Baja. With Jose, we visited Baja producers of Beachy and Oscar Mancillas.
Oh, yeah.
And they have a lot of Rosa down there. A lot of people make Rosa, and it's a little different than up here, but it was cool to see that. I probably, I don't think Ryan loves Rosa. It's a low acid grape, and it's hard to make in a natural way. But we've done well. We started topping with the Cabernet Pfeffer, adds a little acid to
That's
it.
Cool.
But I think it's a cool grape. It looks like a table grape. It's a giant. It looks like maybe Vermentino or something, but even bigger. Loose clusters, easy to destem. Yeah. So we started to destem it, and then kind of made better wine, and so we've continued to do like light maceration and destemmed, and that's a fun one. But we only get. It's not even in a block. It's one giant vine out here, one giant vine over there, and we don't even get to call the pick. Like Pat lets us know when we can come pick up the stage our bins. So it's kind of an afterthought for us. We make 50 cases of it, but it's one of my favorites that we make. And then we started making an orange wine as of last year. Right. Orange Albariño. Ryan and I are big proponents of Albariño in California. We think that it's like a great grape for the future of California. It carries lots of acid, way late into ripening season, and it seems to be somewhat resistant to smoke, and so we hope to see it more. We'd like to graft some over in a couple of vineyards around us, so we're hoping to make more and more Albariño. Awesome. We've also planted a little bit in front of the winery. We don't own the land, but our landlord's a dear friend, and he let us use the 2 acres to plant Vermentino and Albariño.
Cool.
So we've planted some there, and that's dry farmed and organic, and then we make Negrette, which probably won't make anymore because Soleto might sell, and we don't know if we'll get the fruit, and if they don't sell, then maybe it gets ripped up. Who knows? So we might never make that wine again. But we also get some fruit from Piscina's Ranch. Cool. Which I really love. I think Kelly is doing the Lord's work out there, and we've been a couple times to visit, and that's a real, people throw around the term a lot, of like what do they say? There's a lot of terms that people throw around, but like permaculture, like regenerative farming, etc. I think Kelly's probably doing the closest thing to it. Probably, that's cool. Out of people that I know, and at places that I've visited in California. So we're stoked to get fruit from there, and the Grenache is pretty awesome. So we're gonna bottle some Grenache, and that'll be our first vintage of that. But awesome. That's kind of the whole thing. We have some plans to do some other wines in the future, but we just hope to keep selling wine and keep making wine and not being put out of business by costs getting really crazy. Yeah. And we're still able to make wines that fit into a by the glass program, albeit on the higher end of by the glass, but we're able to get there.
I feel like most domestic wines fall into the high end by the glass. I mean, there's non-appellational Cabernet Sauvignon that's the cheapest stuff is like $16 unless it's owned by Gallo or whoever, and that's probably, who knows what those vines look like. I know what those vines look like. I drive through some areas of Napa and Sonoma, and you just look left and you look right, and all there is grapevines. There's no trees, there's no bushes, there's no shrubs, there's no nothing. It's just grapes. It's like you're driving through the desert, but it's all grapes. It's happening in Oaxaca with the agave. Exactly. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Ooh.
Not anymore. No.
Yeah. And what's up with the labels? All the labels are.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, some of the labels remind me of each other, but then the Chuchaquis Sparkling Albariño, it seems different than the rest.
They're actually all done by the same guy.
Oh, cool.
He's actually an equity partner in the business because we believe in paying our artists because and I'm not going to hate on the rest of the wine world. I don't know that anyone does that, right? But I believe that, even with people like you and I who are educated wine people, we still kind of judge wines on their labels. When you go into a store and you don't know any other wines, and even subconsciously you're like, well, I know that this wine is Grenache from California and this wine's Grenache from California, but this one has a cool label. Yeah. And even if you're like, no cool labels, I just want good classic wine, it still hits you somewhere in your subconscious. Yeah. Even master somms get fooled by labels. Yeah. And so I believe, and then at the layman level,
it's probably 70% of the buy.
People see a nice label and they're like, I want that wine. Yeah. So I truly believe that the artist should get a lot of credit for selling the wine. And so he's on the back of every label. It says original art by Cameron Forsley in the bottom left. And when we do dividends, he gets a percentage. And we're happy to keep him happy, and that he's our only artist. And we're gonna pay him when we make T-shirts and we're gonna do some stuff like that this year. Yeah. And he'll get paid on that. And we just love his art. And for the first one, I believe me and Andrew picked that out of a book of his works. And just kind of loved the image of the peacock. So cool. And we knew who it was, his wife, because we know his wife. And so we were like, oh, you put a peacock on her head. And we had asked him for a bird on the label. Sure. So it just worked perfectly because there was all these little birds at C5, and we thought birds on the label would be great, and so that worked. But the other labels, one of which we have here, those are all me just going, hey dude, this needs to be like a space event. Yeah. Like I want it to be like Space Cowboy, maybe something happening that's crazy, in the background. We want a spaceship in it. We, just make it like really crazy. Yeah. And he was like, here. And it's always the first thing he gives us. I'm like, yep, that was exactly
That
what
works.
we wanted. And the name for that, Champelli is a funny one. I wanted to call Champelli Calfondo.
Calfondo.
Because it would be like
that.
Colfondo, which is the
Yeah.
method we use for it, but Calfondo.
That's cool.
Now, that would have been cool, but Ryan wanted to call it Champelli. And the reason he wanted to call it Champelli is because it's kind of an inside joke. Because, well, firstly, it's like champagne, so Champelli. Martinelli's is by us, so Martinelli,
that's
Champelli.
funny. Yeah.
Then, really, the inside joke is that Champelli is actually a weed strain that was in a song by Andre Nicotina and Mac Dre back in the day called Champelli Trees.
Yeah.
No one would know that except a couple of East Bay types, like what Ryan's from Concord, and I went to Berkeley High. So, we thought it would be fun.
That's awesome.
So that's why it's Champelli. The other one is Super Bueno because Ryan, I think he'd been sending his son to maybe Spanish lessons, or there was some Spanish influence on his son, and his son had all these funny catchphrases. And he used to say, super good. And then he said something with bueno in it, and I was like, "Could you say super bueno?" And he was like, "Super bueno," and it was just so freaking cute that I thought it would be a good name for the wine.
That's so funny.
I don't know. We're not taking ourselves very seriously here, but all the names come from either something random like that, or they have to do with Tiburcio Vasquez, or Super Bueno was just a play on the Spanish,
Yeah.
But and Champelli had nothing to do with it, but Bandito is a reference to Tiburcio Vasquez. They actually have a movie called Bandito as well, that was written about him.
Yeah.
And then Sangre de Tiburcio is the name of the red sparkling.
Oh,
which is
okay.
the blood of
That's
Tiburcio,
awesome. Yeah.
because it looks like blood.
Yeah.
And then we have an idea for a couple others that are going to be named off of like fictional characters in old California novels.
Awesome.
So yeah, it's definitely, we want to play around with that. We just want to harken back to like old Californios and the people who used to live here before the panhandlers came. And Tres Didos is one that we've thrown around when we do a blend of three whites, because there was one of the people in Tiburcio's gang got his three of his fingers shot off. And they called him, or two of his fingers shot off, and they called him Tres Didos, which means 3 fingers. So just fun stuff like that, So never going to take ourselves too seriously. Yeah. The idea isn't to make super high-end wine. It's like everyday wine, kind of proletariat wine.
Very much proletariat.
That tastes good, and winemaking wise, like the sparklers are all as natty as it gets. They're sans souf, they're sans anything. The only intervention is adding back its own must so that it re-ferments. Although it doesn't even re-ferment because the first fermentation isn't quite complete.
Right.
So it's kind of like keep going in the bottle. And the other wines, are just kind of lower macerations and some just good winemaking and good fruit. And that's it, man.
That's awesome.
Nothing to elaborate on there. It's just...
but I think that's perfect, right? And that's what wine used to be, right? It was about just making good wine. It was about putting something on the table, share with your friends. That's what it was, And I think it's great to see that. And it's funny because it's you hit the nail on the head earlier when you were talking about labels and people picking stuff. I mean, even myself, it was for Thanksgiving and we had a bunch of people coming over, and I was like, I don't have any Beaujolais at the house. Well, I had a couple, but I wanted to get something new and try something new. We always do Beaujolais Day on January 1st because everybody's off. So everybody's responsible for one cru, and we get everybody together and we taste all 10 crus. But I went to Flatiron and I saw this Bonnet Coton Beaujolais Village. I was like, dude, this label's sick. It's $25, whatever. I
Pierre
just
Coton.
grabbed,
Yeah, those ones are killer.
Well, this is the Bonnet Coton is the is it a collaboration?
I know who you're talking about.
Yeah. It's like an underwater cafe.
Different
mermaid
label,
stuff. Yeah. And And I got it, and I was like, "This is sick." And then I tasted it, and I was like, "This is super natty." You know, but it was fine. You know, I was happy.
You wouldn't have bought it had you known it was tasting like that.
Well,
maybe.
and that's the thing is, but that's also the thing is, you know, for probably more classically trained people, when they look at a bottle like this, they would go like, "Oh, that's." I mean, obviously you can see that it's a pet nat, but you know, you would look at a label like that and go like, "Oh, that's probably a really natty wine."
Yeah.
You know, and.
It advertises as such.
It does, but it's done well, and I think we're all getting to the point now where we realize that there's lots of great natty wine and there's lots of bad natty wine, just like there's lots of good, clean. Not I don't want to use the word clean, but there's good non-natty wine and there's bad non-natty wine. You know?
Yeah. There's really shitty industrial wine out there. I think
Just
there's
tons.
no argument there for me. There's some very good industrial made wine. I don't think either me and Ryan really carry the dogma as much as like maybe other people think we do, or maybe I guess we should or something like that. Like I think we for me, I'll only speak for myself because Ryan, I've drank Ryan over 12 years with Ryan, but you know Ryan can speak for himself. I would say that for me, what I look for in a great wine when I pop a bottle is just something that shows a trueness of fruit. I really like tasting, you know, I wouldn't say that for everything. Like I don't need primary fruit to be the overwhelming characteristic in every wine, but I just love to get kind of this trueness, and I don't even really know how to explain what that is, but something that just smells like nothing else but the grapes that were in that vineyard, and I wouldn't know because I haven't tried vintages and vintages of the same vineyard. I would never know that, but there's something I look for, and it doesn't necessarily have to do with sulfur. Now, I've never had one of those wines that were sulfured to death, and to be truthful, and having said I'm not dogmatic about sulfur, to be truthful with you, most wines that have a lot of sulfur, I don't want to drink.
Right.
Like I smell, if I can smell the sulfur.
Yeah.
And I'm very sensitive now after working with Ryan in a winery.
I'm sure.
To potassium metabisulfite in wine, and it's like, dude, it smells bad.
Yeah.
Unless it's Riesling, and then I'm like, whatever.
Right. Yeah. I was gonna say Riesling sulfured to death, but
love me some Riesling.
Yeah.
You know, German Riesling, especially. But and those totally contradict what I'm saying because they do smell of sulfur, but they smell of other things too, and it's sort of integrated for me.
Yeah.
It's like whatever that is that. But the other day I opened a Chablis that someone brought. It was like a reputable importer. I won't say who. Very reputable. Very reputable.
We don't have Chablis, so I know it's not ours.
It's not you. There you go. Popped it. Oh, I mean, it smelled like they had just sulfured the wine.
Yeah.
And put it in a bottle. And they probably did.
Yeah.
And it was atrocious. Like it was, I could not drink it was singeing my hairs on my nose. It's how much sulfur was in it. I thought I was gonna pass out. Like it was that bad. So, you know, there are those extremes. I think that if you add a decent amount of sulfur in, I you know, I'll hesitate to speak too much on the production side because I am still, you know, learning, and I don't want to say anything that you know sounds uninformed or whatever, but I think that, you know, I'll say that we're a winery that does send everything to lab, and we end up knowing exactly how much bound sulfur is in each wine, and most of the time it's under 10 parts,
Right.
sometimes under 5.
Yeah.
And we add sulfur to most of the red wines. The white wines not so much. There's maybe 2 white wines from Stirm that are unsulfured, and all the sparklings from Chuchaquis are unsulfured. But the rest of the wines get hit with some sulfur. We found that we had a mouse. You know, we had some mousy wines way back in the day, and me and Ryan are really sensitive to mouse. That's one thing that we don't like. Funny enough, we're getting a little bit in the Sangiovese, but I've never tasted a mousy one. You know, it happens.
Yeah.
It's a Sansouf wine. We're totally okay with it happening every now and then.
And
it
it's mild.
It does.
It's
mild.
It's not out of control, you know.
Yeah, in Catalunya they say it's la colita. It's the little tail. It's not the full mouse. It's just the colita.
Just the tail.
And that's showing me some colita. But no, like we had an issue with some of the reds being kind of mousy, and you know before we would only hit, especially with Chuchaquis, we'd only hit the wines. 5 to 6 times a year. 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 5 to with sulfur before bottling, but we noticed that we had some mousy wines, and we didn't want to act after the mouse happened already. And I can't really speak I can say things, and maybe someone will say you're talking out of your ass, because I'm not a bona fide winemaker. But what I believe was happening was that in our fermentations, our primary, whenever there was a problem with finishing primary, and malolactic fermentation happened quicker. Like, let's say malo finished in a week and primary was stuck, chugging along, but not really. And then there was sugar in the wine, and then we had a lactobacillus problem, and that's when we would end up with mouse. And so when we ended up sulfuring our musts, we ended up, like at pigeage, just sulfur your must to the tune of like 10 parts, 15 parts. Not really a lot of sulfur, but a little bit. It ended up never being a case. It would arrest the mallow.
Wow.
And the primary would then, take its time, but it would finish, and then mallow would finish after, and we never ended up with mousy reds ever again. And so for a lot of the reds, we'll just sulfur it at must, and to the 20 parts or something like that, and then at bottling, maybe depending on the wine, depending on I can only speak really for Chuchaquis, but 20 parts at bottling, ending up with less than 10 bound.
Yeah.
In the wine, and ending up with a wine that doesn't have a shit ton of VA, doesn't have mouse, maybe a little VA, maybe a little Brett, which is cool for us. We like it.
Yeah.
So it's just not, we're just not
like
dogmatic.
Rias has Brett,
A lot.
It'll get
some years.
some years that it gets way out of control.
And Rias, for example, but even like if you were to look at a more conventional producer from Chateauneuf, like Pego, used to be bready as hell. Not bready anymore these days, but used to be super bready. That was never a thing that people hated in the wines. So
it was just a unique kind of character of the vintage. I mean, Foillard is another one that, vintage to vintage, there was significant variation sometimes. Great wines, still would drink them.
Smelled like you were approaching the barn, and I'm not mad at it. So but we make these wines on Souf because they can. Yeah. Every year, these wines are mousy as hell when they go in the bottle. Not good. They taste weird. And then they ferment, and they finish, and they don't have any problems usually.
How long do you hold them after you crown cap them?
They'll take anywhere from, depending on the vintage and how hot it is in spring. If we get a hot spring, then we can release them earlier. Usually they bubble up earlier. But, sometimes we're waiting until May, June, July even, some years. Yeah. Until it gets hot and it really kind of picks up again. We never had it where it was like a month later. Maybe it's the method we're using. Maybe, it's not stored in a warm enough facility, etc. There's a lot of things that could be happening. But we're also not pitching it. We're not doing anything to get it going.
Right, agitate it.
Just putting the, we're hoping, what we hope is to catch the wine, the must that's on glycol. Even if it's at 36 degrees, it'll start to ferment eventually. We hope to catch that on its way up on its fermentation, and we catch the almost finished cuvee on its kind of downturn while it's still going. And if you blend those, it will happen quicker. I see. Is the way I understand it.
Right.
Ryan would come on here and be like, you don't know it. And I probably don't, but this is the way I've understood it with Ryan. And so, it was fun. We just bottled 24 a few days ago. And we caught it right in that time. And it was like, Ryan was really stoked that we just had managed to catch it. Because he was like, this is going to bubble up nice. And, the wine's going to end up tasting really good. So we didn't make a lot of wine in 24 because we didn't know what was going to happen. We saw a lot of people going out of business, a lot of farmers going out of business. We had not sold as much as we normally sell, so we were weary. And so, we really scaled down in 24, and we're going to feel that towards the end of this year.
I'm sure.
We run out of almost everything.
Yeah.
But we'll make a bunch of fresh wines in 25. We'll really hopefully release them by April. And, we'll keep chugging away. We'll have a little time where we don't have a ton of wine, and that's just business. Yeah. I'd rather have that be the case than us not being able to pay our growers.
We're sitting on multiple vintages.
Vintages. That's the reason we've made it as a company so far, is that we have made pragmatic decisions.
Yeah.
And so we scaled the hell down in 24, and this year we'll scale way back up because we can see that we'll be out, and also we can see a renewed interest in our distributors as per these tariffs. I think people are feeling the thinking about the next 9 months, and like when their current stock of imported wine is going to run out, and how much the next batch of imported wine is going to cost, and thinking maybe we should lean into our domestic producers. We didn't see that happen in 2020, really.
Yeah.
It didn't last very long. It was, I think, Trump made the order it got passed in August, and October of 2019, I think it went into place, and it was only like 3 months that it really, and then obviously got voted out after that, so it went away. But these seem to be here to stay. So I think we're gonna find out what it's gonna do. Yeah. I have an idea what it's gonna do to the import side, but I don't know what it's gonna do to the domestic side. I hesitate to say it's gonna be good. Yeah. Because a lot of our distributors are gonna be put out. Not put out of business completely, but like they're gonna have to fire some of their staff. They're gonna have to scale down. They're not gonna have as much money to pay us, or the liquid asset to like invest in domestic wines. They still have to keep their businesses going, so they'll import wines, and they'll probably reduce their wholesale margins. Yeah. So it's not good, but will it, as Trump or other people may think, like, will it result in more domestic wines being sold?
Save our industry.
I don't know.
I don't know.
That's a big question mark. I don't really see that happening.
Yeah, I mean, and additionally, where you're getting your glass and your foils and your ground caps and everything is probably going to get tariffed too. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, 100, like funny enough, we get this sparkling glass from Canada. Yeah. From Quebec. Yeah. It gets literally, it's cheaper for us to pay a couple guys to truck it from Quebec to our winery in Watsonville. Yeah. Which is, I don't know how long of a drive. It must be like 4 or 5 days or something, like a week drive. To bring it in, we're probably anywhere between, I don't know, $12 and $17 a case for
just glass.
From Europe it'd be 17 to 25.
Yeah.
So it's way cheaper. Yeah. I don't know if that's going to continue being the case. Domestic glass is extremely expensive.
It's super expensive.
So, we'll end up paying a shit ton for glass. All the capsules, et cetera, all those prices will go up too. Yep. There's no way we're going to really be able to keep ourselves in the upper by the glass with all of these costs rising. Yeah. I mean, it's just going to be really hard. We'll make really slim margins. Yeah. And if it has to be that way to sell wine, then we'll keep doing it and just make a smaller profit. Mm-hmm. But there's only so much you can do. Yeah. At some point, we need to be profitable enough to do the work. Mm-hmm. And if it's not, then we have to make small amounts of wine and charge a lot more. Right. Yeah. And the people that are able to do that, more power to them. Yeah. That's great. I wish that for most producers, but it's not reality for everyone. Not everyone is Seritas. Not everyone is these producers that can charge $80 for their wine and make 500 cases and do great. Good for them. Yeah. I mean, and the wines are great, but we're not, and we don't have that luxury. We're kind of placed where we are, and we don't really want to make expensive wine. Yeah. I don't want to make expensive wine. I want to make wine for the proletariat, and so we'll see what the effect of these things are going to do. I'd say for my day job, probably not going to be very good.
Probably in the same boat.
But there's nothing you can do. Yeah. I'm not going to cry over spilled milk. I'm going to bust into action and
just got to keep moving forward.
Yeah, we got to figure it out. Yeah.
Yeah. Let me pour you some of this. Oh, whenever you're ready. Sorry, I thought you were ready.
All right. Oh, it's white. I don't know why I pictured it being red.
Oh, yeah. No, I also was happy that we went back to the Albariño just to kind of freshen up the glass a little bit, because again, this is, I don't even know what the winemaking here is actually, but I've had this wine before. I really like this wine and it made me think of you. So it's
cool.
Just
hey. Right on. Well, salud.
Salud. In the vein of wine for the proletariat, I kind of have a overarching question, I guess. So I've had maybe 3 or 4 of the different wines that you make. Lucky that Andrew Nelson pours them, 2 by the glass, usually at a time, and it fools Aaron, and you have, again, a lot of people that really love you guys and love what you do, and there's lots of opportunity for me to taste the wines. Actually, the first time I had the sparkling Albariño was at West Coast Wine and Cheese, Chris's old spot,
Yeah, back in the day.
That was, I think that was 2020 was the first time I had it, probably.
Cool. You had the 2019 vintage.
Yeah.
Kick ass.
It was really good. Yeah. I was like, I don't know what this hipster juice is, and I tasted it and I was like, fuck, it's really good.
Yeah.
And especially if Chris was pouring it by the glass, he was very much
totally
very well acquainted with the West Coast, as one could imagine. The style of wines that you're making throughout feel very kind of like light, playful. There's not a lot of like heaviness. They're great BTG wines. They're great food wines too, but it feels like, again, you're not trying to make super expensive wine. It also feels like you're not making like ultra serious wine either. I mean, is that kind of the approach when you're making the wine? It's just like fun wines that are vibrant and bright and kind of approachable?
It's interesting. I mean, it's funny because Ryan is the winemaker. Mm-hmm. There's no question about that. And it's funny because people often, I go around the country selling the wines, both his and Chuchaquis. Mm-hmm. And people go, okay, so it's very clear, like, you're the winemaker for Chuchaquis and Ryan's the winemaker for Stirm. And I'm like, why is it so clear? And like, well, they're just so different, like, and stylistically, like Ryan makes much more like classic style mm-hmm. wines. And it's so funny because, like, Ryan's wines have pretty much the same regimen for except maceration wise, maybe, mm-hmm. With our light red. Ryan doesn't make a light red.
Right.
Ryan is I can comment on Ryan's winemaking because I've been seeing it since 2013 pretty much. Ryan is the kind of guy that is iconoclastic with his winemaking. Mm-hmm. Like in Davis, they tell you to ferment wine, white wines at this temp and red wines at this temp, and Ryan's like, ferment it all hot.
Yeah.
Don't give a shit. Like hot as hell. They tell you to gently press and do all the. Ryan presses the bejesus out of the fruit, up to damn near 2 bars.
Yeah.
Most of it, sparkling not as much, but like, everything that they tell you to do, Ryan just doesn't do that.
Yeah.
And he's taking that from lessons he learned at Tiggersnerhof and lessons that he learned with Justin Willett. A lot of his white wines are definitely the like old school classic, like Santa Barbara Chard, like way, except not quite as much sulfur and no filtering,
sure.
bullshit. But definitely the regiments come from that.
Yeah. And
with Chuchaquis, they are more playful wines, but I'd just say that the styles are. Ryan doesn't make a pet nat. Pet nat can't not be playful.
That's true.
I've never had a serious pet nat personally.
Yeah.
Like, I've had a serious champagne method wine before. Many,
yeah.
But for pet nat, it's kind of like, and although this isn't true it's pet nat on the umbrella of pet nat, but it's definitely a different style of pet nat. No, they're playful, and that's, I think what we get in a lot of our Chuchaquis wines is like a lot of like bright fruit, and like primary fruit from just our vineyard sourcing. Like I think that our vineyards, for the Albariño, it's a kick-ass vineyard. It's like just a really good Albariño fruit. And like, who'd have thunk? Albariño on the coast, on sand, makes sense.
Yeah.
Funny enough, we started making Bandito in 2021. And that was like Negrette. It's a very dark-skinned grape, hence the name. And we did a 3-week whole cluster ferment and we have like 65th use first growth Santa Cruz Redwoods that we fermented, that we inherited at the winery. One small one medium one big one. And that was fermented in the big one, and that was a serious wine. It was tannic, it was dark, it was it was hibiscus like fruit, it was a real dark fruit. It still ended up being like kind of light and fresh by the time we, I think it's a winery terroir thing maybe sometimes.
Yeah.
But, for different wines, I'd say different things. But yeah, most of the wines, even for for Stirm Wine Co., there's a freshness to them.
Yeah.
I think one thing that has to do with that is just that we're in the region we're in, we get a lot of acid.
Yeah.
We just do. It's colder. People don't think about how cold it is, but we're actually the northern central coast, like inland from Monterey and stuff, we get a lot of cold ass wind.
Yeah.
And never really goes at our winery in Watsonville, at the vineyard that's in front, never goes above 85 degrees.
Yeah.
Maybe 82 on the hottest days, 80, 83, 84. Yeah. Never really that hot. It's not Napa. It's not, even Mendo gets hotter, It's not a hot region. So we end up getting really good acid. And I think that can add to the playfulness of the wine. We also are starting, especially in the reds, to do less maceration, and maybe even a little less extraction. Just we like structured reds. We like big tannic reds. Me and Ryan both love, Brunello de Montalcino. We love like high acid, structured, tannic, reds that will take 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years to really get into their
to wind
own.
Down. Yeah,
we like that. We love the high tone nature of the VA that we get in the Zinfandel. But the Zin, for example, is co-fermented with Riesling,
right?
And then we blend back more Riesling, and that actually ends up lowering the acid, higher the pH in the wine. Which everyone goes, oh, you probably throw in the Riesling in with the Zin to for acid, and we're like, dude, Zin has way more acid.
Yeah, ripping. Yeah,
it's ripping.
Yeah,
but it does mellow the wine out, and in that way, it kind of preserves the freshness of it because it's not quite as dark and acidic. It's less acidic and not as dark, so it kind of makes it fresher. I don't know. That's not the reason why he does it. I think he just does it because he likes the way it comes out like that.
Yeah.
But that's my interpretation. Is it does end up lightening and freshening up the wine. And Zinfandel can be rough,
Yeah. Especially when it gets fermented all the way up.
Yeah. And whole cluster.
16 and a half, 17 or something like that.
Well, we press up, when it ferments, we get a lot of raisinated fruit. So when it ferments, we're fermenting in a big redwood, maybe 2-3 weeks of whole cluster, some destemmed on top, and then we shovel the thing out. And then when we press it, it's still got 2-3 bricks to go. And we end up with 16%. And you get and when you blend in the Riesling, it lowers the because the Riesling's
awesome.
at 11. So.
That's funny.
So that's a good way to lower the people water back Zinfandel everywhere. Even natural winemakers water it back, and so we're able to add some Riesling into it to kind of have the effect, and it turns out real good.
Well, everybody that deals with Zin deals with raisinated grapes, though, right?
I think
that verasion's
everywhere.
so fucked. I mean, it's green and desiccated all on the same vine.
But then you get all the spectrum of
That's true. That's true.
That's what's interesting about
Instead of having to do multiple picks, you're just picking one cluster and getting the whole range.
It's like making Gemeistersatz in Austria, in Vienna. You pick the vineyard at once. You have some grapes that are barely going to hit 10% alcohol and some that are going to hit 17% alcohol.
Yeah.
It blends up nice.
It's like Craig Hartmeyer's Victor Weiser.
Oh, yeah.
That 52 variety blend from, what's the fucking vineyard that he
sells? That's his attempt at Gemeistersatz.
You're right. Yeah. I wish I could remember the vineyard.
It's in the Delta, right?
It's that famous one in the Delta that has 52 varieties planted. It's all Gewürzt and Gruner and
it's perfect.
All this crazy stuff.
And those are the grapes that they used for Sauce. I'm a big fan of the style.
Yeah.
Actually, we first wanted to make me and Andrew were obsessed with Portuguese and Spanish wines.
Yeah.
Portuguese wines are all largely.
You guys met at Spanish Table?
We met working at the Spanish Table together while Andrew was the buyer at Contigo.
Oh.
So Andrew was running the program at Contigo. I think he was 1 day a week in Berkeley, and that's how we met. That's and it was really crazy to meet someone who was what do you think about this wine?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that producer's chill, except they made one bad year of this, and I didn't like them anymore. And he was like, yeah, that year sucked.
Yeah.
And it was no one really knew Spanish wine like that in our industry. No one really cared about Spanish wine in 2012.
Right. Yeah, it was just Rioja. I have a Rioja on the list.
Rioja,
who cares?
Someone learned about Mencia, and it was this big thing.
Yeah.
But it was beer, so and it was made by Palacios, and it was fucking, really classic.
Yeah.
Didn't taste anything. When Ribera Sacra hit, everyone was like, oh, this is Beaujolais.
Yeah.
And so it was cool to see his take on things that I had been really studying, and I didn't really he had a very different palate than me. I had known Rioja and Ribera, and I also came from South America where they oak the death out of most wines. So I liked oaky wine at the time. I mean, this was 15 years ago, and I loved oaky wine. And when Andrew would bring more and more wine from Spain around me. Also at the time, I'll give Jose a lot of credit because I was buying a lot of wine from Jose, and those were the first natural wines I had ever tasted. I think the first one he brought me in like 2009 or 10. Wow. And I tried some. I remember it was Viñatigo and Tajinaste in the Canary Islands. I didn't know at the time because I didn't understand wine like that, but I was like, oh, it was fucking oxidized. Like, it was orange, but not because of skin contact. Like, the wine was oxidized. But it was the first time I had this like oxidized, not Rioja like oxidized, but Canary Island oxidation. Right. And I was like, what is that? Like, that is so cool. And it was Listan Blanco. And of course, I thought it was cool because I had been drinking a lot of sherry. Right. And I was like, oh, it's the same grape, except grown on an island, not fortified, grown in like, volcanic ash. And it was cool. Like, and so, those were my first, and I'm so happy to be selling the wines now because those were the wines that inspired me to like natural wine. And I got to give it to him for that. But, yeah. So I'll stop there. Cool.
What do you think about this wine?
It's fun. Like this? It's really fun. It's got a little fun reduction going on, and has like a very it's a very mouth coating texture to it. I'm not getting a shit ton on the nose. Like, it's kind of still a little reduced, but kind of lanolin-y. There's a little woolliness to it.
Has like a very puckery kind of vibe to it. It's just like
good
full
acid,
mouth coating acid.
Yeah, a lot of texture. That's what first hit me, was the reduction in the texture. Yeah. A lot of texture in the wine.
Yeah.
High acid.
Yeah.
I mean, it could be Albariño.
Could be.
It kind of shows like Chenin too. Or something reminds me of Harsh Levelou in it too. It's like got that woolliness of Harsh Levelou, but it's just got a lot of texture, kind of yellow nectarine fruit.
Yeah, it's got peachy, so much on the palate. Fruity. There's just so much going on, and I agree on the nose. It's kind of like what's in the glass.
It's a little hard to detect on the nose just because of the reduction. Yeah. But like stylistically, it could be any of those things. I think.
Yeah, it's a 50 case production wine because I was like, you guys make small production stuff, and this is something I got to have not too long ago. It's a French Colombard from Trinifort. Yeah.
Cool.
Casa Verde Vineyard Mendo.
Love it.
Yeah, it's cool. These guys are great. Everything they make is cool, small production. And I was thinking of you guys and your small production, and
it's rad.
High acid, vibrant wines. And
I learned a lot about Colombard recently going to Baja.
Oh, really?
Baja. The best white wines I had in Baja were of Colombard.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I think that Colombard is the future of white wine in Baja.
That's awesome.
And
That's cool.
It's just a fun grape variety. I mean, you think about where it's grown, right? Côte de Gascon. It's a hot region. This is a grape that carries acid way late. Yeah. And it's a late ripener too.
Yeah.
And it will have some acid. I think it's a late ripener. Anyway, a lot of acid.
Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't imagine it being more acidic than this. It would be unpleasant, I think, if it was more acidic.
It also tastes like it's gone through mallow.
Yeah. It has this great, rich kind of vibe to it, too.
It's super good.
It's a cool wine, yeah. Yeah, I dig it.
I remember Martha made a fun Colombard back in the day, and I think that vineyard a lot of people have used in the recent past.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
But that's not in Ukiah, Where's this? Mendo.
Mendo, yeah. Yeah, this is the Casa Verde vineyard. I don't know much about it. All I know is that we poured this by the glass for a little while, and it was this cool wine that people were really impressed with. We're pouring a Malvasia Bianca now from Russian River as our like interesting pick,
Cool. Yeah.
And it's cool. I'm having a blast going through and tasting all these great indigenously grown whites that are really cool. So, anyways,
fun wine.
Yeah, I like it, and I also like this wine for kind of like a conversation wine, and similarly to the style of wine that you guys make, it's like, if you and I were going to sit here and have an hour and a half conversation and drink like heavy big red, I mean, I might be sleeping on the table right now. You know what I mean?
I don't know. If you brought me some 2017 Brunello,
oh well, yeah,
I would be very pleased.
Yeah. That's true. That's true. Cool. Well, what else? Anything else? Am I missing stuff?
I mean, you've heard me ramble for.
It's great. Well,
I can talk. You're
doing a good job.
Everybody that knows me knows that I can just not shut up for a long time. So be careful. You ask another question.
No, that's fine. No. We're almost to the limit. So I want to make sure to if there's something else. So you have the 420 event with Andrew. Any other big events coming up? Any releases that we should know about from the winery?
Yeah. We just bottled on Sunday.
Yeah.
What was that? Yesterday.
Yeah.
God, Lord, feels like it was last week. We bottled Canelo Albariño, which is our orange Albariño, which we did so well with that we ran out already. So I'm glad to have this one in bottle, although it's gonna need a month or two. We bottled Gemelli Chardonnay.
Oh,
Ryan's
cool.
Gemelli Chardonnay, which is really fun. And God, I mean, Chardonnay grown on limestone in a cold region. Like, how could you go wrong? Ryan is hitting it with the perfect reduction too. It's just a really fun wine right now, and I think it's going to slowly come out of that reductive phase and just going to be the most beautiful wine. We bottled a little bit of rosé, which is, Stirm rosé is always kind of a fuck you to rosé because it's like 95% Riesling, 5% Zinfandel.
Yeah.
It's our you come to taste with us and the first wine's Riesling and you go, no thanks, I don't like Riesling, and then we give you the rosé.
Yeah. That's so funny.
And you go, I love this.
Yeah.
You like Riesling.
Yeah, my favorite in the restaurant's like, I don't like Chardonnay, and I go, I'll be right back, and I pour them Chablis, and they go like, this is amazing. What is that? I go, it's fucking Chardonnay.
Good Chardonnay. Yeah. And then those three wines, and just bottled up the 24 of the. This was probably one of our biggest hits.
Yeah.
This bottle's showing funny, but like it's a really fun wine, and we've done really well with it. So that's one of our biggest biggest successes. So we'll keep on with that program. And
I mean, even with the way that it's showing, I mean, if you're sitting down with a plate of meat and cheese, it's gonna it's still gonna crush it.
Taste that amount of mouse, after some food, for sure. But we're
in this sterile, isolated environment, so it's a lot easier to pick it up.
I'm ridiculously sensitive to it, and unfortunately, because it really has ruined a lot of natural wine for me. Because some of the best wines in the world, I swear to God, some of my favorite wines in the world have gone mousy. Like at first they're just absolutely amazing, and then they go into that phase and you're like, oh, that sucks. But like originally they were insane. Insane wines. And it's just this pureness of fruit that you get with Sansouf wine that you don't always get with the one that's sulfured, and it just takes something out of that, and I can't really put words to it, but you do notice, that it's something that hasn't been sulfured has this vibrance of fruit that you just don't get otherwise. And, if you have to get a little mouse in there, then so be it.
Yeah, a little trade off, the necessary evils, as they say.
Oh yeah, it's mousy.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, we'll put something else in your glass. We'll do last minute words of advice, statements. Is there something that you want to say that you want to leave listeners with?
Man,
The world's your stage.
I don't know if I'm at liberty to give advice. My life's kind of crazy, but I got nothing. Okay. Ask me a question and I'll be able to. It'll give me a prompt. I don't know, advice.
Or I mean, whatever. Or statements like drink more wine, or you could say whatever you want. I mean, really, is there something you've been mulling over the past week that's like in your head that you want to?
I mean, I've mainly been anxious about these tariffs.
Yeah, I hear you.
But
yeah,
I would say, as my motto is, if you haven't traveled a lot abroad, go do that.
Yeah.
Try to soak up some culture outside this country. There's a lot to be. I think right now is the time to discover other countries, because this one is not going in a good direction.
Yeah.
So I think every person in college should have to do a semester abroad. I really do. I think that we'd change the world that way. I really do. I think that people just had 6 months to a year abroad and met some people from another country and saw a different life and saw that there's possibility of living differently.
Yeah.
And saw what other people's realities are and could actually gain some empathy from that. I think we would be a different country. I really do.
Yeah, yeah.
And I just wish everyone did that. But, I don't think it's going to be easier in the near future. But
Well, it'll be cheaper than you'll be able to buy a plane ticket for what the wine costs after tariffs.
It will.
All right, let's cheers it out. What's your final splash?
Let's go another Columbar.
Columbar.
It's delicious. Why not?
Sick.
Cheers.
Thanks, dude.
Thanks for having me.
Cheers.